Welcome along to Deal Sourcing Week on Property Tribes all this week. And joining me for the duration is Anthony Ayton, who is a landlord and also founder of Property Tribes Repo List. So who better to talk and have along on our Deal Sourcing Week? And Anthony, I think it's an interesting topic to discuss because newbies have a very different kind of view of finding deals to obviously a more experienced landlord and investor. And I think it's important that they understand that there are actually two different marketplaces for finding property deals. Could you just talk us through those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, essentially, when people go to purchase a property, the traditional route is obviously to go to an estate agent and to look for the property that you like, find out what it's worth, pay pretty much what that property's worth, and that's most people's ordinary experience of purchasing property in the UK.
And that's what we would call the retail channel.
Absolutely, yeah. Outside of those sort of more vanilla ways of purchasing property, there are other routes to acquiring property. I won't go through them exhaustively, but main ones to think about are perhaps auction properties. And the difference there is that the vendors at auction often want to get rid of property quickly. They have to have a transaction finished by a certain date. Or there might be problems with that property which a clued up investor can sort of value how much it costs to remedy that defect and then bring the asset back into line. So obviously you've got the auction space, that's one particular area. Other areas that I'd say are more sort of trade areas to look at are repossessions. Often repossessed properties aren't in fantastic condition. The vendors who are the bank are looking for the quickest sale possible, and you're not dealing with somebody that is selling the property that they've put their heart and soul into. They're not trying to extract the maximum value for the Magnolia kitchen that they put in. With the repossessions, if you can move quickly, often there's money to be saved there. And finally, and obviously this probably straddles both market spaces, refurbishment properties or anything where you're substantially changing the configuration of a property. First-time buyers don't generally go near this because the money that they have, they need to put into the deposit. But for more experienced purchasers, and certainly for people in the trade, they will look at a property and they'll say, well, what could this become? Could this potentially yield more rental income, or could it be worth more if it was configured differently? And that's where I think most of the action is in today's property market.
Indeed, and I think I think you were alluding to, people need to look at the angles and see where there's opportunity. And I think it's important to consider buying at a deep as discount as possible, because actually it creates a kind of safety net, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, any person that's trying to make money, obviously purchasing and the price that you purchase at is critical, because that's where your profit ultimately comes from. But I would say to people probably not to get too hung up on this idea of a fixed discount percentage on property. Some of the worst deals I see are deals where people are buying in areas where they would not otherwise buying property that nobody wants for a deep discount, which, is it real or not? And for fantastic deals where you've seen an amazing angle on what you can make that property become, sometimes it's actually worth paying the market price to tie it up. And I wouldn't, I'm not going out there suggesting to people always pay the market price, but, I'll give you an example. Often you get streets, if you take London, which is an area I know well, where one end of the street will have 3-bedroom terraced houses. Further up the street, they're 5-bedroom terraced houses. So and that sets a price precedent for what a 5-bedroom could be worth. So the issue is then you look at a 3-bedroom house, you say, well, if I do a loft extension at the back and an extension and a rear extension, I can have a property which in the market looks like that 5-bedroom property. How much will it cost me? What do these things go for? You know, and it's just a simple question of doing your homework in those terms, really. And if you see that opportunity, if you work out that, hang on, I'm going to pay 50 grand for a loft extension, and it's going to add, you know, £80,000 to the cost of the property, you know, then there's a simple decision for you to make as an investor. You know, do you want that extra 30? Is it worth it for you?
And I think, you know, buying at a deep discount, it means that you have an equity cushion, which essentially reduces risk, doesn't it? And you've actually already factored some profit into right at the beginning of the transaction and the life of owning the property, but also obviously better yields if you can buy at a discount.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, that probably touches onto another area when people are looking at what opportunities there are for them, particularly if you're, you know, I see a lot of people that are obsessed with the idea of making HMOs, for example, and they've never costed out what the real yield would be if that house was converted into one-bedroom flats. And it's something that I would say, if that's what you were looking at, you should always cost both of those things, because, you know, you take an HMO. And sorry if I'm talking to people that already know what these things are. It's a house in multiple occupation where, you know, there's shared. You know, you have a shared kitchen and shared bathroom. You know, often with those things, by the time you factor in, you know, the extra management costs, the cost of the bills, it does not make you more money than had you cut it into 3 one-bedroom flats where you've got a lot less hassle. So I would say to people, you know, measure twice, cut once. You know, there's nothing to be lost with looking and checking and doing your homework as many times as you can.
Absolutely, amen to that. I think, you know, also relationships are important because, for instance,
generally, yeah, they make you happy, yeah.
in property, because if you had a relationship with an estate agent, they might advise you if a sale had fallen out of bed, and you could swoop in and maybe offer a discount, or also unsold lots at auction, chatting to auctioneers. It's worth talking to people, letting them know what your interest is, and keep those relationships going, and they will bear fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing there is that, you know, people don't like having their time wasted, so you don't call an estate agent and say, give me every one-bedroom property you've got and then not complete on anything. Do what you say you're going to do, and, you know, you think of it from his perspective. If a person has lost a deal and this is his, you know, monthly bonus that he's looking at, and you're a person that when you say you're going to buy something or that you're interested in something and it's the right price, you can move and make it happen, he's going to come to you first. You know, I've been a property sourcer, and you fairly quickly learn that you give your best property to your best clients because you've got a deal.
Yeah. Indeed, have the money in place before you start looking.
Yeah.
Have the finance there.
Don't go looking around a property and go, yeah, next November I'm really thinking of getting into property. It's really boring.
Indeed. I think it's a good chat time actually to now talk about developments at RepoList, because actually you developed RepoList to make it easier for landlords and investors to source property deals. Really,
not quite true. I actually made it easier. I wanted to make it easier for me, because I was lazy and I wanted to do the minimum amount of work and still be able to service the clients that I had. And then I saw the opportunity that if it was useful for me, it's probably useful for others. And so, you know, when I was sourcing property for my clients, I'm looking for things that are unusual, and I'm looking for things where there's an opportunity. So I don't generally look at houses that are in perfect condition and done up unless, you know, there's access to the kind of idea, unless I can see that you could build another house in a garden, or there's some story that's going to be interesting for an investor. So essentially, what we've done at RepoList is we've created a system that filters the entire market, and wherever possible, I get it to look at the things that I would look at. So, you know, one of the filters that we added, I think, since we spoke last, was a cash-only filter. And the reason why I wanted to put that on there is it's the idea of how a cash-only purchase works. When somebody says something is available cash-only, my first question is why? You know, is it because there's a short lease? And if so, I want to know how much it's going to cost me to extend that lease so it's not a cash-only property, and is there a markup to be made there? We had an interesting one that was over in East London, which was a house which had been divided into flats without planning permission and was on notice. It had an enforcement notice on it, and so the vendor was essentially saying, this advert read to me as, I am desperate for somebody to come and buy this property off me. I've messed it up. It needs to be converted back into a one-bedroom flat. And so, it's just common sense that that's a conversation to be had. How much does it cost? What's it worth at the end? There's possibly another conversation to be had with the planning department about, what other options were available. But all I want to know when I look at things is, how much does it cost to put it right? And does that leave me a margin?
Indeed. So essentially, Repo List, it filters cash-only properties, cash buyer only, auction
properties,
repossessions, and you've added land plots as well.
Plots, yeah.
And the great thing about it is that you can set Repo List to actually email you details of properties that you're interested in as they come live on the portal. So essentially you can set up your own personalised alert system, can't you?
Thank you for reminding me of that, Vanessa. I almost forgot. Yes, that's exactly right. You've got almost an unlimited number of saved searches that you can do, that you can make into alerts. And so essentially what that means is that, some investors, they might have a high yield element to their portfolio which occurs in Manchester, and they might sort of have some capital type investments that they do in the south of England. And what you could do is you could say, well, okay, for my terraced houses that I'm looking for in Manchester, I'm setting a search area that's this wide. Repo List, email me whenever anything new hits the market fulfilling that criteria, and then you can have a separate search element which does your London thing, and there's no limit to the number of searches that you can set. When you do a search, the system will ask you whether you want to make an alert from that search. Tick yes, and it's done.
Brilliant.
Oh, sorry, one other thing. Make sure that you also add us as a contact in your mail clients, so that it doesn't go to spam. That's the key thing.
Well, it's a really efficient way of finding deals and getting kind of the early nod on deals coming to the market. And we're going to have a lot more content about deal sourcing with Anthony as Deal Sourcing Week 2016 on Property Tribes continues.